Psalm 30 offers us lots of familiar themes whilst you're reading through it. And in the process of me preparing this devotional, I have almost read Psalms 30 for at least 30 times, because the theme that runs through is very intriguing and important to us living in the modern day. And I'm presenting here the best sequence of this verse so that we can provide a clear understanding to our thoughts. So let me share my screen quickly here. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to resequence the 12 Psalms we have here, and I'm going to read it for you. Okay, so I'm starting from verse 6. When my life was easy, I said, nothing will bother me. It pleased you, Lord, to establish me as strong as a mountain. But then you hid yourself, and I was overwhelmed. Now, when the psalmist says that you hid yourself, Lord, which means that trouble had come upon him, because normally in our lives, generally, we believe that when the Lord is there, everything is fine, isn't it? When the Lord isn't there with us, we are in trouble. That's how the human mind normally thinks. But there is an assurance that we know throughout reading the Bible. We do understand that the Lord is always with us, whether in good times or bad times, the Lord is with us. But the trouble that we go through, the trials we go through, is also with us as we live upon this in this world. And this is the experience the psalmist is having here. It pleased him when everything was fine and easy. Nothing bothered him. He was happy. And it pleased you, Lord, to establish me as a strong mountain. And the Lord wants us to be without troubles and trials. But then when sometimes troubles and trials come, we feel the Lord is not with us. Okay. And verse 8 and 10 is next what I want to read. I'm going to come back to these verses, but I wanted to just highlight the sequence for you. So everything was fine. God was happy. Everything was fine. This is the thoughts of the writer of the psalm. I'll tell you who the writer is later. But a trouble struck him, and in verse 8 he cries to the Lord and supplicated my master, saying, "What value is there in my death? If I descend into the grave, will the dust praise you? Will it tell Lord, take pity on me, be my helper?" And then verse 12, so that my soul may sing to you and not be silent. Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. I will exalt you, Lord, for you drew me up and gave my foes no joy at my expense. I cried to you for help, Lord my God, and you healed me. Now see, the trouble he came upon him. He presented his supplication to his Father, his God, and our God drew him up and gave him joy and healed him. Verse 3, you brought my life up from the place of the dead. Lord, restore me from being submerged into the pit. You have turned my mourning into joy. Now, this is the experience after he had endured the trial. When he presented to his father, the father had turned his mourning into dancing, removed my sackcloth, and girded me with joy. Then finally, verse 4 and 5, sing to the Lord, his followers. This is to all of us, because the psalmist had a great experience, and now he's asking his friends to sing to the Lord for his followers and give thanks as you recall his holiness. For his anger is for a moment, which his favor, while his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may spend the night, but joy will come in the morning. So here is a wonderful promise. Here is a beautiful line the psalmist writes about um, himself and his troubles, and how the Lord had delivered him and rescued him when he presented his troubles and problems to him. So it is a psalm of rescue. The reading this psalm helps us to maintain confident hope and trouble when it strikes, even if it signifies God's anger, because the psalmist here mentions that his anger is for a moment, while it will soon pass and our well-being will return. That is the hope that this psalm is telling us. Some scholars associate this particular psalm to the near-death experience, like they almost were taken, overwhelmed by death, but then the Lord had rescued them. Think of the example of Hezekiah. He was dying, you know, uh, and the Lord restored him. Some associate this psalm to the demise of Haman and how the children of Israel escaped the destruction um, in the book of Esther. Calvin, he writes, this is for us as Christians. He tells us this is a spiritual illness from which we have been delivered. That's his experience. Um, but then the psalm is believed to be the psalm of David, in his anguish over his sins with Bathsheba's affair. Um, he writes of how the Lord had healed him from this particular sin. So you could see that this psalm can be applied to us in various forms. It can be applied to an individual. If you and I, when we struggle with our sins, our secret sins, it helps us how God is able to restore us. If we are lacking strength or faith in our life, it helps us how and tells us how great our God is to restore us and provide us that strength to become overcomers and with the challenge of faith. And so even as we go far as to even Christ had experienced this experience where he in Garden of Gethsemane required his father to strengthen him and help him and support him. And if Christ needed that, we need this daily manna in our lives. We needed his word. We needed God's assurance to constantly enable us and tell us that he is able to provide us what we need whilst we live upon this world. Similarly, this psalm would come alive to all of you who are listening here as a hope of resurrection, because life is always upon this earth has got an end. Death is almost imminent for us every time. But the hope of resurrection is what the Bible teaches us through the psalm, as well as through various other passages in the scriptures. The hope of resurrection, whenever we are enduring a physical illness or a spiritual illness, death is imminent to us. It is inevitable. We live in an uncertain world. But regardless of physical or spiritual death, we have the hope of resurrection that is given through this psalm for us and through the rest of the Bible. Now, going into the psalm specifically, um, you know, um, in verse 6 and 7, when life was easy, I said, I have nothing to bother. Think of the strengths that you have. We sometimes, when we have financial success, when we have a stable relationship, or when we are very successful in our careers, uh, we don't worry. We think, oh, we are consistently performing, and everything is fine. But think of the uncertainties that may strike, at any time. That's the type of world that we are living in. And by recognizing and appreciating that we live in an uncertain world, it keeps us very close with our Father in heaven. We can foster a sense of balance and avoid taking um, everything for granted in our lives. When life is stable, we think ourselves as to be too strong, being untested. We imagine that we can withstand any hardship because, okay, I've got this financial strength, or I've got this stable relationship, and various other things. Even in hindsight, the psalmist's honesty here is so admirable, my brothers and sisters. It As it confesses to us an unproven strength that crumbled under pressure. you know it stands as a warning to us. The psalmist was, David was, like that. He felt that, he had everything, and the nation was going peaceful in his reign. He was here sending the army away, and he was at his home, and he indulged into sin. That's how unstable his life had become. And so he pleads to the Lord, when problems struck him, when he knew that he had sinned, he knew that he had fallen, and he pleads to the Lord for help. And he cried to the Lord. Think of the difficult experiences, challenges in your life. Sadly, we often achieve insights about our situation only when we are pressed, only when we hit the difficulties of our life. Until then, we don't have an insight of our own self. This is what happened to David. He felt that he was all right until the problem struck him, and he started to realize who he was. And that's a good thing, in a way, that the Lord, when we go through troubles, he allows us to experience and understand our own self better, and we are able to grow into maturity. Okay, so here we can see, it helps us purge our minds and our thoughts. It's like a medicine. When we go through problem, it is a medicine for our souls, just as, we take modern medicines to heal ourselves. Trials and troubles, in a way, heal us and take us to a better life and better relationship with the Lord. Dealing with, like, my brother, for example, he lost his um, 8 months old son, caught death, and he was going through a very difficult time in his life, challenging, and it was a painful period in his personal life. And he was able to navigate and go through that grieving process, with good counseling and through prayer. He was able to cope with the emotions and adapt to the absence of his son. And he was able to develop emotional resilience and a deeper appreciation for the relationship he had with his child. Um, and it was a greater understanding for his own life. How he values and prioritized his life further on, and it helped him build and become for that difficult situation. So that helped him also get closer with God. Here I'm not only talking about a spiritual um, journey, that when we have fallen in sin, I'm also here talking about a spiritual journey that have genuine difficulties, and how the Lord may be able to restore us when we continue to remain close to him and cry to him for help. And in a way, the psalmist is here saying in verse 99, if you see that, what is there? Is there any value for me if I die, Lord? You know, so he's, in a way, he's allowing, challenging God to say, look, if you keep me alive, at least um, there is something I can tell about you to this world if you restore me. But if you let me die, then there is no value. I cannot praise you in my grave. So he is challenging God. No, he's telling God, okay, allow me to live, and I will tell you, I'll tell of to the world of the great things that you have done. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? So here David praises God for the restoration he has provided in his life. He praises uh, God, and praise itself is a confession. Sin is a type of when we sin, we confess, and when the Lord restores us, we have to confess as well. Praise is a confession. When you say what the Lord has done for you, when things are going badly for us, in the midst of our tribulation, let us confess our sins. When things are going well for us, in our joy at his righteousness, let us confess praise to God. But we should always be confessing. We should never give up confessing. So that's what we ought to do in our lives. And when we read the Psalms further on, you can see here in verse 2 onwards, I cried to you for help, Lord my God, and you have healed me. You brought my life up from the place of the dead. So this seems like the psalmist was, David was, you know, restored from a near death experience. You have turned my mourning into dancing and removed sackcloth and girded me with joy. And the ultimate goal and aim of our Father in heaven is to give us the joy. While the order of nature demands that death follows life. Yeah, we all are, as I said earlier, we all are deemed to die. That's the order of nature. But the Christian order that we learn from this psalm is of a redemption. It insists that life follows death, based on the example of the resurrection of Jesus, Jesus Christ. Life always follows death. It is a reversal of nature, and that is the order of hope. It challenges the nature itself. That is because of Jesus Christ, because of what Jesus had done in the Garden of Gethsemane, because what Jesus had done at the cross for us. This despair world needs life. Jesus knew that. And therefore, my brothers and sisters, this morning, I want to leave you with this thought that God had reversed through Jesus the order of nature itself. That means he is willing to provide us life. Death follows life as per nature, but as per God, life follows death. May the Lord richly bless you as you contemplate on this thought and the psalm. And if you have any questions and thoughts, please feel free to share.